Welcome to the Rule of Life podcast. Today, we're going to hear a story of how the practice of generosity shows up in the everyday lives of real people. Jesus wants us to see that everything we have belongs to God. This week, Lola Ayodele shares about what it means to live that out.
My name is Lola, and the practice of generosity has given me eyes to see others in my community. I think my parents were my first example of generosity, especially my dad, because he gave everything he had was almost for everyone else as well. So it's we had this huge, first of the house that we lived in when I was growing up was given to him as a gift. Somebody just gave him a house. And then that house had, we call it a boys' quarters back home, where it's a separate living part outside of your home. And we had uncles and family friends, and it was just something to be shared with everyone else. So that for me was just oh, you have resources and it's for your community. So I think for me, that was the picture of ease. He gave with such ease that in my head, I was okay, this is how we're all supposed to live. It felt very communal. I have memories of growing up with aunties and uncles and family friends, and they're your auntie, but you're not related. It's your brothers in Christ and sisters in Christ. I feel that was my vision. And then my dad, because he was the first of 12 siblings, he would either pay for people's school fees. And it was just I don't remember him ever being why do I have to do this? It was this is a responsibility. So he just took ownership because he was given a lot, stewarding it for other people too. I think was his vision. I was in New York when COVID, everyone is just trying to figure out how do we live? And I noticed in my neighborhood, people didn't hold so tightly. I didn't live in an affluent neighborhood, but it seemed our heart's disposition was to share what they had. Because I remember my friend lived in Greenpoint, and it was a wealthier neighborhood, and we would talk, and she was I think people in my neighborhood are more afraid. They want to hold on to what they have. There isn't really ease, and they don't want to get close to people because they're I can't lose anything I have. And we were sitting comparing, what is the difference? Why are some people more afraid, and others are I have this little birth for all of us. So I think that was my first vision of seeing you don't have to have a lot to have joy. And then if you went to a different neighborhood where your money and your perception was the most important thing, there wasn't really any joy. So I feel that for me was the closest of you don't have to hold on so tightly. That's that story backs your stats of just maybe having more isn't the answer. And that was my first real vision of just okay. Whenever I think of generosity in relation to Jesus, myself, and others, I always come back to community because I feel I'm challenged or inspired either by the way people live or what he shows me. I think there's this verse that talks about the giver always has enough, but the miser just always runs out. This idea you're trying to hold on tightly and you never seem to have enough. So for me, it's been slowing down to receive his gift that allows me to open up to give to others. And the first example that I have was when I first moved to Portland, and the missional community that I lived, did life with, they were so generous that it became the norm. This is how we live our lives. So I started working at my job a year ago in May. And the first week on the job is May 8th. I got a text from my roommate that my apartment had flooded. And it was 3 of us. We had heavy rain, maybe the night before. And there was a backlog. So water was coming up from everything, from the kitchen sinks, from the bathrooms. It was the weirdest experience. So I got that text message. I was at this new job, and it was so disorienting. So I sent my community group a text message. And then one of our members, she drives over to my place, and at this point I don't have a car, so I head over with the bus, and I get there, and my roommate's community group is already there. They've taken out my rug, they're vacuuming, and then my friend just starts helping me pack my clothes because I think I'm just in shock of what is happening. It just felt so surreal. So I'm taking clothes from my closet, handing it to her. She's folding. And then we drive over to her house because she lived in a 1-bedroom. So it was her husband, and I had the extra room. And she got dinner, and we just checking in, are you okay? What just happened? And I end up living with them for 3 months, not paying rent. And then because I didn't have a car, when I got the job, the commuting made sense. I knew how to get to work. But with living with them, there was just no route. So she would drive me to work every morning. And that was like a 35-minute drive. And she would literally be like, I'm so grateful for this time that we get to connect. Like, it just made no sense. So she would drive me to work, and then I would take Ubers back. And then that was when my community group got me the gift card, because they were like, we know you're sad. And they were just trying to help me make sense of everything that was happening to me. So I moved out of the apartment, like the home with my friends in July. And then I was still commuting. It was taking me like an hour and a half every day to get to work. And then another member of our church, who isn't even in my community group, he decides like, I'm going to help you get your license. So maybe 3 times a week, he would drive to my office and just let me drive him back to the Northeast just so I could get practice. And I think that was like, must have been hours out of his week, because he's coming to me maybe during rush hour. He like pays for me to get my driver's test, and then I pass. He's freaking out because it feels like a communal win. And then maybe a month after, he shows up to my office and he's like, hey, guess what? Like, the car is yours. And I just start crying because we were all looking for a used car online, but he like went out of his way, went to a mechanic to make sure the car was perfect. And I had no words. I honestly was just crying. I was like, I can't believe like you did. It was just it was just so kind. So yeah, I feel like that was the biggest testament of God's goodness, because it made such a difference. That for me, like the end of last year, getting that car, the time that he spent with me, just the generosity of it just softened my heart and made me want to open my eyes. Like, is there anybody in my community, like, who needs Jesus? Like, who needs love? Who needs his generosity? So I've just been a huge recipient of people trusting Jesus when they had no idea, like, what it would get them. They just trusted him and they were obedient. And for me, it's been like seeds of how do I show up for other people? And in all honesty, I think when I'm on autopilot, I buy into the lie that like the more I get, the happier I am, all those things. And then being called back in quiet times of just like, no, the way what is that? The reverse kingdom. It's like when you give your life away, you gain more, and choosing to invest in treasures that won't go away. So I just moved into a new apartment, and I've been learning what does it look like to be content with what you genuinely have. And the verse that's been my lifeline is you're blessed when you're content with who you are, no more, no less. That's when you find yourselves proud owners of all that can't be bought. Because I feel like I've needed like an anchor, like something to reorient me back to what's true. So no, honestly, I'm in the process of learning that like I have enough. Like it's like a practice. And then believing that and practicing it gives me eyes to look at the people in my life of like, okay, what ways can we show up for people? So like for me, sometimes it may not be monetary. It could be like writing a letter to a friend who I'm like, you seem down, or like picking flowers for a coworker who just seems sad. So it's like little things of trying to be creative with margin of like, maybe I could just ask this person how they are genuinely. So I think I've had to find creative ways if money isn't like my first option. It's like, how can I still love and serve people well, you know?